Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Kate Kite, and I'm the Continuing Education Coordinator for Illinois Heartland Library System. You are joining us for our third Thursday Continuing Education program, followed by our Members Matter meeting. I would like to thank Harrisburg District Library for hosting us in person today. We have a few people here in person, but our presenter this morning is Pat Burg with the Illinois State Library. And because Pat is joining us through Zoom, we do ask that everyone go ahead and make sure that your camera is off and that you're muted. And then in order for us to record attendance, if you can please make sure that your name is either your first name and last name or your first name and your library. So, and I think that that is all my housekeeping for this morning. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Pat, who is going to talk to us today about the Illinois Public Library Annual Report.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks a lot for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here today. One of the housekeeping things I would like to clarify is how I can share my screen when I need to.
You should just be able to go ahead and start sharing whenever you're ready.
Where is that feature at on here?
There should be a little green button at the bottom.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you. Have no fear. Have no fear. It's all good. Thanks again for having me today. I'm going to give an overview and background of how these questions on the IPLAR are created and developed, and also discuss some common questions that I receive all the time with some of those answers, and then talk a little bit about what to expect in 2025. So I'll just start off right now saying that I've got a few things that are going to be added to the chat. One of the things is going to be my contact information. And then there are several links. One of the links is to the Federal Public Libraries Survey Search and Compare tool. And one of the other links is to the direct link to Counting Opinions, which is the database where the IPLAR resides. And also the link to the web page for the Secretary of State's website for the IPLAR. So if you don't know already, obviously it is called the Illinois Public Library Annual Report, but we just call it the IPLAR. We will have time for questions afterwards, so I'm looking forward to that. And if this short presentation doesn't answer all of your questions, feel free to contact me offline and we can schedule a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting, or you can always email me your questions. I'm available all the time, so I'm here from 8 to 4:30. And I love to schedule office hours too with folks. That way everybody gets the individualized attention. So a little bit of the background. The IPLAR must be completed by all public libraries as required by state statute. It must be submitted to the Illinois State Library within 60 days after the expiration of the library's fiscal year. Public library districts are due on September 1st. And the statutory language is embedded throughout the IPLAR form in Counting Opinions throughout. Those kinds of questions that are really driven by Illinois statute. So more of the background. The questions on the IPLAR are a combination of state and federal questions. The core of the IPLAR contains federal questions regarding income, expenditures, personnel, programming, collections, and visits. The federal agency that receives the data is the Institute of Museum and Library Services, IMLS for short. And that's under the aegis of the Public Library Survey, which is commonly called the PLS. Most recently, there have been additional programming questions by age and type, 21 new questions to be exact in the last couple of years. The additional questions were designed to further delineate the age groups and to identify how programs were being conducted, whether they be on-site or off-site or virtual. This was a byproduct of the impact of COVID-19. The federal questions are created by the IMLS Public Libraries Survey, again, the PLS. Each state library designates a state data coordinator who meets with other states and with the PLS on a regular basis to work out definitions and questions to provide consistent apples to apples comparisons for national outcomes. I am that designee, by the way. The cycle for new and revised questions is a 3-year process. Final questions and definitions are approved by the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, with the federal government. When new questions are added, it is considered a trial year to introduce the questions. The first year you complete a new question, you may not have been able to gather the data sufficiently, but it gives you time to consider how to gather the data for the next year. And the PLS has created a national dashboard that is available on their website, and a link is available on the state library's website and will be in the chat here. So I get a lot of questions on the daily about filling out the IPLAR and what's the meaning of all of this? And so I just gathered a few of the most common questions. I wouldn't really even call this an FAQ. It's not that formal, but these are the questions that I get asked the most and some of the answers. And it kind of will feed into, this background that I just gave you on how the questions are developed and why things are kind of the way they are. One of the most common, questions is, how do I access the IPLAR to complete it? Well, you log into Counting Opinions with your username and password, and you can contact either myself or anyone in the library development group here at the Illinois State Library, and they can give you that information. Several ways to get to Counting Opinions. One is through that direct link that will be in the chat and also on the State Library IPLAR webpage. What if I don't have data for the new question? Well, hopefully I've addressed how the IPLAR questions are developed and concerns about new questions. When new questions are added, it is a pilot for the first year of collection. Try your best to complete the question and begin collecting data for the next year. There are options throughout the survey to say unknown for your answer, which is actually a -1 that will show up in your data. It's really preferable to give a number, and I don't mean a best guess necessarily, but it's better to have some kind of number, because then for the next year you can compare and say, okay, this is where we were last year. I think we can get a better handle on it this year. But you can always say unknown, and then I will follow up with you when I see that. I don't collect data the same way the program section asks for data. How do I complete this section? The questions will likely stay the same in the programming section for the time being. So try to add notes where you may not have programs for a particular age group, or pick the most appropriate category for reporting. We understand that there may be a lot of questions that you ask that are of your patrons or that you collect for your board reports or for your community outreach. But we're really just concerned about the questions that we're asking here. And it doesn't mean that the questions that you're also, all of the data that you're collecting isn't as important, but we will probably, continue to follow the federal guidance on all of these questions. So we try to not make it change as much as possible. I've explained the cycle and how that works. How come my data is not showing up in the fields? This usually means the database has not accepted the data. Again, it's not really a form. It's not a PDF. It is a live database that you are entering your data in. So I suggest that you refresh your screen multiple times throughout the data entry. And you can also, there's a save button that you can press as well. But refreshing your screen actually activates that auto calculation that's underneath the hood of the survey, and that will help show what items the database has accepted. And if it doesn't look like it's there, it's not there. So getting used to that can be a little tricky, but that is the way to make sure that your data is being recorded. And people also ask, well, if I log out, will it still be there? Yes, whatever was saved at the time of entry, it will be there when you log out and then you log back in. It's not something that you want to just keep on your desktop and go back to later. You just want to log out, and log back in whenever you come back in. Where do I obtain holdings and circulation data? So that's I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here. Hopefully, screen one. Okay, can you see this screen?
Not right now.
Okay. I'm gonna put it over. I'm used to Microsoft Teams, so can you see that?
I'm wondering if maybe you have to click a confirm button on that share screen.
Okay,
You're not sharing anything right
okay. So when I hit share, it's saying what screen? Oh, I got you. Thank you. I think I got it now. Are we good now?
now. Yep, that looks a lot better.
You guys
yeah.
are awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. So I'm just what I'm into right now is just what you see when you're entering your data, and this is called the data input screen. And I'm live with the survey right now. And so when we're talking about the holdings and circulation data, that is actually in section 17 and section 18. And so there's this little table of contents to the left, and you can click on it and you can go directly to the section. So right there is section 17. And this is, we've called it resources owned. Again, this is predominantly federal questions. When you see these little PLS and then a number, that's the Public Library Survey. That means that's their question. Of course, we're interested in this information in Illinois as well, but it just gives you an understanding of how this is put together. So when you're trying to fill this out, you'll probably need to look towards your consortium or your local database. In the case of Heartland, it's Share, or if you're in a standalone, it would be your own database. And so you can create reports that way. And the people at Share are amazing, and they help at many levels on gathering data for people and helping them through this process. But you can do it yourself, and I encourage you to become very familiar with how to gather this data. And that's the holdings. So that's the resources owned, or the holdings. And then section 18 is your circulation. These are aside from the programming section, these two sections are the most commonly asked about sections, and that's why I am just sort of featuring them. But I'm happy to go over really any section that anyone is interested in. And then the questions are, how do I report the holdings and circulation data for electronic resources? So back to the holdings here, you'll see 17.4 are the ebooks, and then 17.5B are the downloadable audios, 17.6B downloadable videos. And that's where you would report things like the cloud, Access 360, Hoopla, and all of those other kinds of platforms that contain ebooks. I have guides embedded in this survey, and one of them is right here. It's called Counting Electronic Materials for the IPLAR. And it lists a lot of the common platforms and what field those platforms are reported in. So it's pretty straightforward, and you can kind of see like items and decide. It's just that we do ask that for the Hoopla collection, you don't count all 800,000 as your holdings. It's just really the ones that have been used by your patrons and that you've paid for individually with that contract. The same is true for the circulation. Down here, we've got use of electronic materials, which is 18.11. And that's going to be all of the circulation, all of those things reported. in those areas in section 17 that I just discussed. So it's going to be your ebooks, your e-audios, your e-videos. There's also, back to section 17, electronic collections. And that's in section 17.7. So that's talking about things like Ancestry, tutor.com, World Book, bibliographic databases, and or educational tutoring platforms. And those are all reported here in 17.7. And their usage then is reported in 18.13, successful retrieval of electronic information. And again, in section 18, we do have a guide here up here called Counting Electronic Item Usage for the IPLAR. Most of the time, this is going to have to come from your vendor. And we understand that a lot of the vendors are not always super receptive to giving this kind of data, and that it can be difficult to extract this. But it's really important, to know how your patrons are using these resources. And it is a question that we ask, and you're paying for it. So it's important to be able to know how those are being used. One of the questions is, how can I prepare for and streamline the data entry process? I do have an Excel spreadsheet that's located on the login screen, which is right before you log in on Counting Opinions. And it's recommended that statistics are kept monthly so that they are already gathered by the end of the fiscal year. This is a very simple spreadsheet, but you can customize it with multiple formulas to suit your library. I've seen very, very complicated adaptations of this, and some people are fantastic at Excel, and I encourage you to get some guru to help you with that, but you don't have to. It's just that's keeping your statistics monthly is probably the best way to keep on top of what you're trying to convey. Also, as I mentioned before, it's a great way to beef up your monthly report to your board, to your community, and other stakeholders that are interested in what you're doing, in your library. The other question that we have is, how do I clear edit checks to verify my data? So after you've finished putting all of this data in, you refreshed your screen many times, you hit this verify button at the top. And what that does is it checks the data. It checks it to see if it's reasonable with regard to the previous year, most likely, but also within some of the other data points that have been already answered in the current year. So if a value is missing, or the value varies greatly from the previous year, you will receive an edit check for that question when you try to verify your data. You will need to enter the value or create a note to resolve the edit check. The note field is represented by a gray icon that looks like a paper and pencil to the left of the answer box. That's right here. It doesn't really look like a paper and pencil, but that is what the idea is of it, I guess. But anyway, you'll get a dialog box and it'll look like that. And then you just type in whatever note it is that you want to explain. You could say something like, we were not counting this the same way, this particular question last year. Now we're using XYZ to count it. Or last year, we think we might have made an error in how we were counting. Or this year, oh, we were only open for 6 months. Any number of things can change the values, and it's perfectly fine. This isn't a punitive exercise. You can always just explain what's going on in your library to give a sense of why is there such a variance. I use those notes from the import-export time. So I just finished importing the 2023 data that everybody submitted last year. I just finished doing that with the PLS in April of this year. So that has all been imported, and there were, I think, 2,800 edit checks in that group. Last year there were 5,800 because of the addition of all of the programming questions and so on and so forth. So I get the same kind of enjoyment in trying to clear edit checks as you all do. So I'm doing it at an aggregated statewide level. And I use your notes to help explain something may or may not have been an edit check when you were filling it out, but it ends up being an edit check at the federal level. And so I really appreciate all of those great notes that you put in there. Not only to clear these local edit checks, but also the federal. And then I would also recommend that you go to the public comment and suggestions area in section 24, where you can say this, you can make a general statement. We were closed for 6 months. We had a flood. We had a fire, God forbid, of course, or I'm a new director. The previous director left suddenly. I'm doing the best I can. And you don't have to say, I'm doing the best I can, but you can say, this is sort of what's going on in my library that would make kind of an impact on some of this data gathering and reporting. And you don't have to throw yourself under the bus, and you don't have to throw anybody else under the bus. In fact, we don't want that. We just want to know what's going on, and that it gives a reasonable explanation as to why things might be a little different this year. Now, the biggest question that I get is, why can't we receive the questions ahead of time? Well, the long answer, unfortunately, is some states, for instance, many states in the US have already started their new collection period this July 1st because they only have one fiscal year. They're only operating on a single fiscal year for the reporting period for all of those libraries. But Illinois libraries have 6 fiscal years, and there are some other states that have that as well. We're not alone. So our annual report opens in January 1st and ends on September 1st. And next year's IPLAR will be created in this November when the current data is checked for 24 and ready for export-import for the spring. We build the new survey on the old framework to maintain continuity in the question numbers in the database. And the guidance documents and new survey will be developed and loaded in November. So all the numbering has to change, which is fine. And there's no problem with that. It's just that there is a particular order that this has to go in process. So remember that the new questions are considered a pilot for the first collection period. We want you to answer it as best as you can, but if you can't, give the best number, you can say, this is the best number that I can provide, and you can make a note to that effect. So looking forward to 2025, there are some exciting new changes to the PLS, and I think you're going to be happy about it. So as I said before, the Public Library Survey, and they have a contractor, which is the American Institute for Research. They're called AIR. They're their contractor, whereas Counting Opinions, we contract with them to do our survey. And those surveys talk to each other, and we talk to each other, and we all keep working on all of these questions. So there's been a lot of work on the part of the states to tell the federal government how difficult it is for libraries to report this information in section 17, particularly 17.4, 17.5b, 17.6b. All of these holdings, as you say, holdings, but they're really collections and platforms that everyone is subscribing to. So if you're in a particular consortium, everyone's reporting the same darn number over and over again. And it's not really giving a great value anyway, as far as the holdings. And so they're going to change this to be, instead of saying, how many ebooks do you have? It's going to say, do you have ebooks that you personally in your library purchase? Yes or no? Do you have ebooks that your consortium purchases that you have access to? Yes or no? Do you have ebooks that the state library provides? Yes or no? Now, all of the state library provisions will be pre-filled, so you won't have to worry about that. But for every one of these, the ebooks, the audios, the e-videos, and we're doing the e-serials, it will just be yes, no questions. And I think it's going to be a lot easier for everyone. We're still going to ask for your print materials and in your physical items, kits, things like kick pans and fishing poles and other physical items, and physical audios or videos if you have those. But I think that this is going to really be a great improvement. Then when you talk about the circulation, it will be different as well, because let's look at section 18. So use of electronic materials, you know, that's where you're talking about all your platforms and everything that you know, this was never really as bad for people because they know what they're circulating, obviously. But now it's going to say, you know, it's just going to say the count of everything specific. Right now it has it lumped into one field, but it's going to say how many ebooks did you circulate, how many e-serials, because people weren't knowing where to put serials that were electronic. So this is going to be, I think, really nice. It's going to have it all laid out, and you just put your numbers there. And another change that's happening is in section 17 with the electronic collections, it's going to ask, do you have local cooperative agreements directly? Did you pay for them yourself? Do you, and then it'll say the same question as in with those other electronic materials. It'll say, you know, how many has your consortium paid for? How many do you get through the state library? And, you know, we are in the process of providing more of those than we did in the past, and that will also be refilled. And so I think that's going to be very helpful. There will be, with regard to these local cooperative agreements like Ancestry.com, like I was saying before, there will be an extra question it's a yes/no question asked, and it's going to separate out educational and tutoring platforms such as tutor.com, but it'll all be added together, and I think it'll be really nice. It'll be much more of a list sort of, it won't be a grid or anything like in the programming section. So one thing that's going to be deleted is the website visits, which is, you know, was another request on behalf of the states, because so many people are using Facebook exclusively, and they were, you know, we weren't able to get a lot of the data that we'd like. And then we're going to be asking if you offer automatic renewals. Again, these are all federal changes that we are going to comply with here in Illinois. And I think it's going to be good. So that's really all I had to say. And so I would love to see, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I guess I could keep sharing it if people want to know me to help with things, but I'd like to entertain any questions you have.
We did have some questions come in through the chat. If I could ask Sarah Taylor to read those to you.
The one question I'm seeing is, can you show us that spreadsheet?
Yeah, I can. Let's see here. Oh, nice. Okay, good. So it's right here on the login screen. And so it's just basically a worksheet that's just been put into Excel. And it is, it's very simple. I have seen some really great things that people have done. And if you want to contact me directly, I can point you in some other directions. Because I don't really want to put something out there that I force people to use. You know, you're welcome to do whatever you like, but this is what it looks like. Let's see if I can't get into it. Hopefully, it might not let me. Maybe because it's static. Maybe I'll have to go down here.
You are just sharing your browser, so if you're gonna
Yeah.
you'll need to reshare.
Yeah. Well, see here. See. I've just gone out of things. Okay. Yeah, I wonder why that wouldn't go though. It should have.
Did it
Matt, you
download?
Sorry.
I was going to suggest you may have to stop sharing and then reshare and maybe share your screen.
Yeah.
And Matt was saying, I think, did it download?
Oh, okay. Okay, let me try and do that. But it's super simple. I'm going to get over here in this other area. So I had to log in for that, but it's still not, oh, there it is. I see it. I see what you were saying before, how it's downloading it. I see. That's not how it really works when I'm usually working on it, but appreciate that. Thank you.
So now you'll need to reshare your screen.
It says I'm sharing.
So you're sharing your browser window, but you'll need to share your Excel screen. I'm gonna stop your screen share from.
Can you see it? Can you see it now?
Yeah, there it is. You got it.
All right, so thank you for that. I appreciate it. So this is just a very simple adaptation of the worksheet. And the worksheet is not required. I mean, if you want to use that, if it makes you feel comfortable, you can print it out. It's just a PDF. You can print it out and just gather your data. But you know, what was happening is some of the larger libraries were saying, we'd really like to be able to break it out, you know, and give a certain section to one of my departments versus another. And so this kind of affords that opportunity with this Excel, and they can share it if they want. They can, you know, make it a shareable item. But it's just all of the questions, and just and you could go over here and, you know, create months all the way through the whole reporting year for your fiscal year, and if you needed to for certain things that you're counting all the time, such as your holdings information or your circulation or your reference. And this is just what it looks like. It's the same exact thing as what you would see in Word, except there's a lot more operability here. Good question, though. Sorry, it took me a while to get there. It was interesting how that did that. It just went. Any other question? I think that.
I actually have a question. On the programming section, when I was doing it this year, and I was doing my edit checks at the end, and it would throw up like various boxes within the programming matrix that were wrong. It was next to impossible to figure out what number box they were talking about.
Right. Yeah.
The boxes aren't all numbered.
They're not labeled, right?
And even if I used like I thought I had it figured out, like counting from the beginning to the end were their ward numbers. So in theory, if you worked back 6 boxes, you should be at the right box. No. So I don't know if there's a way to make that better.
Not with the grid. Yeah. And because you can best believe that I would have it labeled if I could. It's a very, very common problem. And it's because it's in that grid. And so, you know, you're just, unfortunately, they are really there, those numbers. I'm going to try and get back and it stopped. Okay, let's back to here, and then I'll share it. Section 15. And I'm gonna share my screen. Where are you? Okay. Okay. Do you guys see that now?
Yes.
Perfect. So yeah, what Jill was saying here, it was Jill, right? Yeah, what she's saying is, here we've got this column, it looks like it's a column, that's labeled 15.1, but it's really that cell. And this is 15.2, 3, 4, this is 5, 6, 7. And so this is a grid that was created, and a lot of other customers of Counting Opinions actually lay this out in a list. And so you could number every single field. They are numbered in essence. You don't see the label until you get down here to 15.29. So I have toyed with changing the look of this so that we don't have the room to do this wording in every single, according to the company. And so that's the problem there. But usually they do talk about what the problem is in the edit check, such as, last year in children 0 to 5, look at these giant numbers, because I'm in the state libraries, aggregated numbers here. You had 58,000 programs this year. So you had children 0 to 5. This year you've got 10. Last year you had 0. Explain, and then the same thing will be for the attendance. Or it might say, it's any number of edit checks are assigned to this. And again, the edit checks are part of a formula that are from the federal government. They're looking for certain things. So usually you can figure it out by looking at what the edit check says as far as the actual category, regardless of the cell number. This is a very tricky section, and I appreciate that. The questions that are going to be added this year, the yes, no's, they're going to be all linear. There's not going to be a grid. And one of the benefits that we have too, just to kind of get off topic a second, one of the benefits that we have of being later to launch the new questions is I get to watch and see what all those other states are doing. And I get to hear every other month when we're on our calls, what problems they're having. How do we head that off? So we do have the benefit of watching what other states are doing before we do our guidance, before we, figure out the process for how this is going to look and feel, and how it integrates and crosswalks within our existing data. Any other questions?
It looks like we have another question from Jill. Jill, did you want to unmute and ask that one?
Sure. Is there a place in your instructions, and if not, could we create a place where it tells us when fields have to match within a section? Because I often find sometimes that's confusing for me, and sometimes that's where I struggle with edit checks, and then I have subsequently found all others as well. And for example, I know in programming, there's some fields up above that have to match fields down below. And
Right here.
circulation.
Yeah, right here. I don't have that in the instructions there. The section 18 is also where that happens, and it's the same concept. So what's happening here is, and I can put that in there, absolutely. These need to match.
It would just be helpful going in, because it's like not knowing. If you don't know that these two fields are supposed to match, then you don't know why they aren't working. But once you understand, oh, okay, these two things have to be the same because
they're the same question.
This is a reflection of that, but we don't necessarily know that unless.
Yeah. So up here, I agree. All of these are all of your programs by targeted age group, and all of your attendance by targeted age group. And down here, it's all of your programs by type. So it's the same number. You just have to break it out differently. So if you had 10 programs up here, how many were on site? How many were off site? How many were virtual? So it has to add up to 10. They're the same thing. And the same with the attendance.
Yeah, just
But that's-
highlighting that would be super
Sure,
helpful. And
I can
again,
do
with
that.
the
That's no problem at
circulation.
all. I can do
Right.
that. And section 18 is going to change. It was that 18.4 should match 18.12 because it's the same concept again. Everything you've circulated by targeted age group. Down here, everything you've circulated by format. But what they're going to do is at the federal level, this question here always talked about everything, all formats. And this is where it gets difficult because trying to tease out those ebooks that are for children is hard, and depending upon the platform. And so again, states have prevailed on this, and it's just going to be physical items. So kits, books, audios, videos, physical things are what are going to be reported in here in 25. So it won't need to match because it won't be including items that are other formats for children. So 18, yay, you don't have to worry about it. But 15, yeah, you will, because they're the same question. They're just asking it a different way. I appreciate that. I'll get that fixed. I'll add that clarification.
Or did we have any other questions come in through chat?
No, that was it.
Yeah, we have plenty of time if anybody has any other question.
I know it's a riveting subject matter.
I just had a question about counting parents and caregivers during story times. Is that
Everybody that comes, yeah.
okay?
And you know, I would say that it's I almost hate to say what people think about some of this, you know, as far as their confusion, because I don't want to add any confusion. But this is not just something in Illinois. I've gone, you know, when I go to a meeting or I'm on the call, people seem to think we're asking for the age of the people attending the program. We're not. I mean, I've had people go, I can't find it. How can I? No, no, no. It's this program was created for a particular age group. It just means it's a targeted age group. So, and I think that they, you know, really were trying to, again, COVID-19, right? We're dealing with lots of virtual things. We were dealing with a lot of take and makes, which are self-directed. They are not programs. We had, you know, we had take and make crafts and story times even, where people would log on, you know, at their own pace, which would be an asynchronous virtual presentation, which is still part of the self-directed activities. So there were all kinds of complex things happening during COVID-19, which created this. That's why I said this was an outgrowth of what was going on. And we all, I mean, everybody, all the states and the federal government were trying to do the best they could to help people create their story about all the work they were doing, even though people weren't even coming in the door. And then we have to show what happened in that time for a national comparison for historical purposes. So that's kind of the reasoning behind why all of these questions were added. And they were added to actually just tell the story. So it is somewhat more difficult because you're having to split things up a little bit more. It's particularly the children's programs. And I know people will say, like, I already addressed this in the FAQ or the, you know, well, just pick the one that it closely is aligned with. It's not perfect.
Thank you.
Question, and I asked this one to you a few weeks ago in email. had about, I think it's section 23, and staff development and training. And if you can kind of explain what all would fall under, like, would this be considered
Yeah,
training hours?
yeah. It's, I think I had a question about this myself, and maybe it was the same person, I don't know, but I had a pretty lengthy inquiry about this recently. Does it mean every little thing that somebody goes on to and logs on to that's free? I believe that this was a vestige question back when we did, there was a lot more development, continuing education, even, at the state library level, where we were really doing a lot of it, different other funds were available to do so. And I think what this was to get a sense of how much money libraries were spending on CE for their staff, and were they traveling? How many hours of training? Because this is a state question here. This isn't federal. And does your library provide training to enable staff to better serve their patrons on the autism spectrum? That was a direct outgrowth of an autism grant that we had through IMLS. Would you like to receive autism training at your library? Same thing. So these were all questions that were meant to get sort of a sense of what kind of funds were being allocated for training, is really what that's for. It's not so much, things have changed so much, so many things are through virtual. So it is meant to say, this is a dollar amount is what we're looking for. How much are you spending on it?
Okay,
I
thank
mean,
you for,
yeah, and that's really what this was about, is, trying to get a sense of the state, what was going on at the time.
So are you saying that if we don't spend money on CE, that we shouldn't include it in 23.4? Because, like, for example, if I have staff meetings or I have my staff watch a webinar that's free, I mean, I include that.
Yeah.
I mean, not
23
20, I mean 23.3. I'm sorry, 23.3. So basically what I'm saying is the hours that I'm reflecting in 23.3 don't equate to the total amount of money I spent.
Mm-hmm. Right,
So is
yeah.
that wrong?
No, I don't think it's wrong. And I think what I would do is I would put a note here and say, this includes free training.
Ah, okay. That's good to know.
No, there's no wrong. This is not a calculated field even.
and I did see there was a question that came in through chat.
I'm sorry.
There was a question that came in through the chat. My computer is running the screen here, so I know that a question came in, but I can't see it.
I can help, Kate. So for questions 23.2 through 23.5, can we silently add in this year to all these questions if they don't already have this year behind the questions? For our notes, adding them to each question is acceptable and the desired way to write notes too, correct? Does
Yes.
that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, anytime you have any question throughout the entire process, as far as, or clarification, I should say, always put a note. And even if you wanted to go, say you wanted to say in 24.1, I wouldn't expect you to do this at all, but like Jill's question about, including free training, you could put a note there that says that, but we're not, it was just a thumbnail kind of question. It's not like we're analyzing that at this moment in time. But if you wanted to say, in 20, that would be another way to just sort of bolster your opinion on that, well, I also included all these free trainings that we, do throughout the year. And I mean, certainly we are aware that people are doing free trainings, you know. The question was really meant, like I said, initially it was really meant to figure out what were people spending on CE.
And then Vicky said.
And this should be clarified, probably, this 23.3 of, instead of saying hours of training, maybe it should say, paid or something like that to clarify that. So, and I can clarify that really well.
And then Vicky asked, does the amount include staff pay for time spent in training?
I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback on that. What did you say?
Vicky asked, does the amount include staff pay for time spent in training?
I think it's just the amount of the cost of the training and travel. It's not like time for time or anything like that. It's not about, it's just like a line item, how it would be in a budget. But it's not a budgetary question. It's not part of section, 9 and 8,
You, Pat? Yeah, I don't know that any more questions have come in through the chat. If anybody has any questions, we do still have about 5 minutes.
I just want to say I really appreciate this opportunity, and I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the conversation. There's really nothing here that hasn't already been asked, and so it's great to bring these up and let other people know that might have been wondering about some of these questions. And I've got some things to clarify, which I'm happy to do. Very easy. And I appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you so much for joining us this morning, Pat. I know that it's everyone's favorite annual report. and and so I appreciated whenever you took time, whenever we were setting this up, just explaining to me even the process. Like, I didn't know that some of these questions were set at the federal level. And so I thought it was really important to know that it isn't just, why is the state asking us these questions, but that you have your own reports that you turn.
Yeah, and Kate, I was so grateful that you took the time to talk to me about all of that in developing this little talk that I, was doing, because, I'm sort of immersed, and I know what questions I get, and there's a lot of them, but it's nice to boil it down and explain, the why. And that was extremely helpful. And I appreciate you really taking the time and digging in with me on that. It really helped develop the whole flow of this. So I really appreciate it.
Hey, Pat, this is Jill. I just want to say thank you, and just let everybody know who's in this webinar. Like, if you ever have a question, Pat is awesome about your questions, because I email every year. You think I get to a point where I have no more questions about IPLAR, but no. And every year I email her clarification, or can I do this, or da 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 da. And you're always so helpful and great about answering the question. Whether or not I agree with the answer is irrelevant,
That's okay.
I'm asking you so I know where to put or not put data.
Right.
And so
right. It's not like it's a democracy,
Right. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, and you're most welcome. Absolutely. Yeah, it's just kind of, I'm always here. I'm available. If you need a Teams meeting with me, I will do it. I know those of you that are districts are just, you're coming into the final frontier here with our final group. That's the biggest group, 368 that are due on September 1. And I know you're gathering information right now. So just be aware that I'm here to help, and you can always just send me an email. You can call me, whatever you prefer, and I will get back to you very quickly.
That is awesome with that. Can someone please assist and put Pat's contact information in the chat one more time for everybody? And Pat, I would like to thank you once again for joining us today. We really did appreciate all the great information, and I think we're gonna go ahead and stop the recording and get ready to switch over to our members matter meeting here in about 5 minutes.
Okay, well, you all have a
Yeah.
great meeting, and it was really a pleasure. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm gonna leave now.
Okay.